Let's reveal our awards ballots. It's early. I know it's early, but it's a good time to set a baseline for the season that we've seen so far. Let's start with MVP. Here's my top 5. Tell me where you disagree. Tell me where you agree. 5, Stephen Curry. 4, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. 3, Anthony Davis. 2, Jayson Tatum. And number 1, no surprise, Nikola Jokic, having an absolutely unbelievable season despite some of his missed games this past week. 29.7 points per game, 13.7 boards, 11.7 assists, 1.7 steals, 1 block, shooting over 50% from 3. Absolutely unbelievable again. If the season ended today, he'd win his 4th MVP, I think, without a doubt.
Without a doubt. It's unanimous. At this point, at the 1 month poll mark, that is 100% Nikola Jokic's award. Also, in the NFL, there's like 17 games. We're at like the 17 game mark for a lot of these teams in the league. So like, think about that. It's like the NFL, this is the time where we've already had enough games that it's okay for the NFL to hand out awards. It's the same thing for NBA. We've got a lot of information to say that Jokic, leading the league in assists, leading the league in rebounds, and leading the league in 3-point field goal percentage, which, by the way, to qualify for that, you have to have at least one three-pointer made per team game, and he's there. He's qualified for 3-point record or the leaderboard. I mean, have we ever seen anything like this, dude? It's incredible. Probably, if I'm looking at your top 5, the one thing I'd probably have a little higher or lower is I have Stephen Curry, that Warriors team, where they're at this season, number 1 in the Western Conference. Considering he was out a couple games, he's still playing at an extremely high level, and everything they do has been because of that guy, number 30. Big reason why I think he's the best offensive player since Michael Jordan, which we covered in the big number last week. Go check that out. I think Stephen Curry is probably top 3, and Jayson Tatum's a little lower. I think the Celtics as a whole, it's hard to distinguish yourself as an MVP candidate on that team because of the system and because of how many good players they have. But Jayson Tatum is in the top 5. I probably just have Steph 1 slot above him.
I think it's fair to move Steph up. You know, it's interesting. I have not seen any of the response on social yet because, I published it, then we went straight to this recording. I'm like, as always, anytime you do awards ballots, there's going to be disagreements. I thought Steph at 5 would be the one that people would disagree with a lot. So I look forward to seeing
too high, you're saying, or too low?
Too high. I think people would say it's too high. Oh, he's averaging only, 23 points per game. How's Luka not ahead of him? How's Edwards or Fox or whoever it is, or Giannis? The Bucks have a losing record. I can't put Giannis higher right now. So KD's missed game. But I think Steph at top 3 would be very fair in my eyes as well. I have him 5th right now. Speaking about all NBA, my second team, I have Ant, Fox, Luka, Mitchell, LeBron. Third team, I have Giannis, KD, Victor, Kyrie, and Franz. I put Franz on there for now as the 15th guy. And there's 20 guys that you could argue on the third team right now. Brunson, LaMelo, Devin Booker, Jaylen Brown, Şengün, Cat, Harden, Jalen Williams, Jared Allen, Draymond. There's a lot of guys that you could argue for that third team. So, but that's currently what I have. Any disagreements, like clear disagreements with those all NBA guys?
I would probably, just because he's only played 9 games, leave out KD. That's about half
Fair.
of the games for the Suns. They're 9-7 this year. So KD's been awesome. But if you're going to put him over some of those other guys, I just would point to playing time. And that's the tough thing about the NBA now is you can't just be like, he's been awesome this year. You have to say, yeah, but he's been out for 7 games. And that's just the reality in the NBA that's becoming, one of those things that in NBA awards, unfortunately, we have to consider how much they're actually playing out there. And for KD's candidacy, I would probably put Devin Booker over him purely because Devin Booker's actually been out there.
Totally fair. Let's move on to the defensive player of the month. And number 3, I have Dyson Daniels, who we've talked about on this podcast. 6.9 deflections per game, 3.1 steals, 1 block. He's been a menace on defense. And number 2, I have Draymond Green, who's anchored that Warriors defense once again. Same old thing from him. And at number 1, I have Victor Wembanyama, averaging 3.7 blocks per game, 1.3 steals. And the big stat that I think really captures his impact this year: opponents are shooting 38.8% within 6 feet of the rim when defended by Victor Wembanyama. That is 23.1% worse than their normal percentages within 6 feet of the rim. 38.8%, Tom. That's wild.
He turns 2-footers into 20-footers. That's what that says. That's what that stat says. Victor Wembanyama, just his proximity. Remember, this is not about how many block shots he has. This is capturing just him being nearby. The proximity of this 7'5" guy turns 2-footers into 20-footers. And that, my friends, is a defensive player of the year winner. Now, you look at the roster for the Spurs. Would you ever think that with his supporting cast, they'd be 8th in the NBA in defensive rating? No way. That's how good he's been. And by the way, it's not just the block shots, it's the steals, it's the deterrence of going into the paint. The stat is, 38% within the basket area, like you said, where the league average is around 55, 60%. But also, the guys are making business decisions. How many business decisions have guys made seeing Wemby out there and being like, yeah, I'm not going into the paint, I'm kicking out?
With the Daniels inclusion at number 3, I had a hard time with that one because as incredible as he's been individually, he's been incredible. He's off ball. He's always in the passing lanes. On ball, he's been a stopper. He's applied ball pressure. He's been great individually. The Hawks defense still isn't good, whether he's on the floor or not. They're still a bottom 10 defensive rating team. So I'm including him individually, but I had a hard time putting him over some of my first team defensive team guys like Evan Mobley, Jaren Jackson Jr., and then the second team I had AD, Bam, Lou Dort, Suggs, Rudy Gobert, and again, same thing. You can mention Jonathan Isaac, Drew Holiday, Tari Eason, a ton of guys that belong in the conversation, OG Anunoby, Jayson Tatum for one of those all defensive teams. But Daniels is a tough one because those interior guys are just so much more important overall, I'd argue, rather than the perimeter guys like Daniels.
Remind me, did you mention Chet in there? And how do you feel about what he's done this year with enough sample size?
I did not mention Chet because he's going to miss so many games.
Yeah.
It's just unlikely. Maybe I should have put him on there considering it's just the first month awards. Maybe that was an oversight on my part, but no,
he's only played 10 of the team's 16 games, so it's hard to do.
Yeah.
It's just what he did in the first few weeks of the season was outrageous, and
it was unbelievable.
Trending to be the best defense in NBA history. Another big number that we did with Dan Devine, go check it out. That defense is still really good. I had the chance to broadcast the Blazers game the other night against OKC, where Isaiah Hartenstein came back and was just awesome. But for much of that game, they were playing small ball with J-Dub at the 5, and they're still just a bunch of Dobermans. They are so good defensively. Alex Caruso also should be, if you didn't mention him, he should be in that all defense category because he's right up there with deflections, steals, the defensive rating while he's on the floor. Awesome. One quick note. You know who's second in deflections per game this season, KOC?
Fox.
I have it as the NBA.com/stats, the hustle stats category with most deflections per game. Nikola Jokic.
Oh, interesting. For per game.
Dude does everything. Wow, he does everything. I don't understand it. He's a cyborg. He does threes. He does the passing. He does the Z-bounds around the rim, which I call the soundboards. He does everything. The guy is a marvel. So yeah, MVP 10 times over.
Yes, he is clearly. And you're right. He probably does belong in that second team discussion. He just does. It's the reality of it. He's gotten so much better on defense. I think, and the one other name, I'm curious about your thoughts on this. I have Lou Dort second team. I tended to lean on the guys playing more minutes. Like I chose Dort over Caruso, Suggs over Isaac. So I lean on the guys taking more minutes for their respective teams. But It's tough, man, because like those other guys, Caruso, Jonathan Isaac, they are all defensive team talents, and on a per minute basis that they deserve it. To me, I think it speaks to the challenge with some of these defensive awards and accolades. Defense is such a collective thing. You can be Dyson Daniels and you can be individually amazing, but it doesn't matter if your collective team is not. You just can't impact the game individually the same way an offensive player can.
Yeah, I saw an interesting conversation with Dyson Daniels and his Aussie mate Lee Ellis the other day. A great video on NBA.com where he broke down a lot of his defensive stats, and he mentioned a couple times, he said, but I got to be careful about over gambling because it really puts a compromised state for the defense. And that's one thing that I'm going to be watching a little bit more, is whether Dyson Daniels is being instructed like this, like, hey, I know you're going for every steal and every deflection, but it is kind of, when you don't get that steal, the gambling does hurt our cohesion defensively on the back line. It's something I'm going to watch going forward, is because for every steal and incredible deflection he makes, you do have to keep in mind the ones that he misses. Is that putting the defense at a disadvantage? And maybe that's part of the reason. I think he's a net way positive for them, but why they're not elite defensively with a guy who's like Scottie Pippen out there.
He's had 2 games in a row without a steal. He had none against the Kings, none against the Warriors. So I do wonder if maybe there's a slight shift in how the coaches are deploying him on defensive end of the floor.